I'm going to structure my response by using one of my father's favorite dishes, which was called, Jamaicans to know this, dukkano.
Oh, yeah.
Now, see, dukkano was a kind of mishmash. You had several different ingredients that you put in the pot or you mixed up. It was always hard to swallow, but in the long run, it was good for you. God was raised on dukkano. So it was always hard to swallow, but in the long term, it sustained you. So my response is going to be dukkano. It might be hard to swallow, but I'm hoping in the long term, it will be good for you. For those of you who are in universities doing critical studies, this is a standpoint epistemology. Okay, just in making it more academic, it's got some roots. So I want to just respond to your talk with 5 P's and 4 C's. 5 P's. The first P is I'm intrigued to know why we're only just making this a Pan-African project. I'm glad that you brought the Africans into it, but we need to remember that reparations was always Pan-African. Even the reggae musicians understood the Pan-African dimensions. Bob Marley sung about Zimbabwe. Even Aswad sung about going back to Africa. So I think there has been a bit of Caribbean exceptionalism in the way in which this has been developed outside of Africa, outside of the diaspora. And therefore, I would strongly encourage you to try and think more globally, systemically, about this process. So that's the first P, the lack of Pan-Africanism and the fact that we're only just now inviting our African brothers and sisters into the discussion. The second P is regarding payment. I'm kind of confused because when we made Empire Pays back in 2005, we came up with a system for how you do payment for reparations, how you actually calculate the different categories of harm that have taken place. Because reparations has 2 dimensions. It has the harm-focused approach, where you look at the damage that was done, and then there's the repair-focused approach. How do we put this all back together? Now, we used to do in Christian circles the repair stuff, but nobody listened, you see. So we went to the harm stuff, and then it got the Church of England kind of thinking about things, because then we started focusing on the need for them to pay the check. You know, they started to listen. So the second P is, how come everybody has just come up with these figures in an arbitrary way? How did the Church of England come up with 100 million? I asked and they said, well, because we heard the Jesuits gave $100 million. Well, that's hardly compensation, metrics and calculus in operation. You know, how did, just a couple of weeks ago, the United Society for Propagation of the Gospel come up with £7 million in light of enslaving over 2,000 Africans in Barbados? They say 18 million, 7 million reported in the press here. 18 million it still doesn't come up to, it's still a very, very small amount in terms of dealing with it. 18 million pounds doesn't make it any better. But the question still remains, how did they come up with that fee? Now, I'm sure there was a dialogue and debate, but where were the metrics to calculate? Now, we don't only go back to 2005, we go back to just last year with the Brattle report, led by His Excellency Judge Patrick Robinson, where we come up with another set of metrics. We've got the Americans involved now. You see, the American lawyers find money where there's no money. Find cash where you think cash doesn't exist. So we have set metrics. So I'm intrigued by the fact that none of them have been used. And the danger in not using these measurements is that we're short-changing our ancestors. We are not living up to the demand for justice, which means we should be asking people to pay what they deserve, not just taking pennies and carving. You know, the Guardian is here, the Guardian has promised some money, but again, I'd like to see the metrics, Joseph. How did you get I'd like to see how you came up with that figure, because if it's just about affordability, then it's not even compensation. If it's just about what you've got in your back pocket, it comes nowhere near being reparations. In fact, more than anything else, it becomes the great reparations ripoff.
Yeah.
That's the second P. I'm moving down nicely. I'll get the others. The third question, the third P is the program of restitution. This is another area of confusion for me, because it seems like it's become a free-for-all. Hilary Beckford came over here, struck a deal with the University of Glasgow. 24 million, we were told. Weren't told how much was going to the West Indies, how much was going to Britain. I was surprised because I thought, I don't know about you, but I didn't know Glasgow was a hotbed of black research. I thought that they would be coming to Britain and saying, hey, look at Indy Andrews. Doesn't look like him, he's like Marmite. Same thing in Birmingham. You know, at least he set up the first Black Studies course. Black Studies research. I thought they would be saying, we need to get Brother Kahindi on this just to save face. Hakeem Adi, genius, black historian. I would have thought that they would have said, let's bring Brother Hakeem into this. Hakeem's just lost his job. Not a penny of the reparations money went to Chichester to help Hakeem keep his work going with black history students. You see, the payment plan is all over the shop, so I'm glad you're saying that there's going to be some order to it. Grenada, the Trevelyan's, the 100,000, how was that calculated? I mean, these people are the math geniuses or I'm missing something. I could go with the heirs of slavery, exactly the same. You know, all I'm saying is, show us how you're doing the math, because the danger is this. You've spoken about the control of the narrative. You know what happens in discourse theory? You control the narrative, you control the people. And in our history, that has meant continued historic exploitation. Many of them aren't doing the maths because they're not respecting our ancestors. And I tell you what, they're not respecting us here and now. Yeah. Show me the check. Show me the maths. Fourth C concerns the historiography. But I've called this projecting back, but it's fundamentally about historiography. When we look at the history of reparations, it's really important that we think about this intersectionally. Because in the experience of black people in Birmingham, it's been dark-skinned black women who's carried the reparations movement. The All African People's Revolutionary Party from 1970 through to the present. Every year, African Liberation Day, all these black women turned out talking about reparations. I haven't seen them in a Guardian article.
That's right.
I haven't seen them in any book just yet. So I'm just saying, another warning is how this historiography, how the documents and the archives are being approached and engaged with, because there's the danger of missing out on a whole heap of work that's been done by black women, both here in Britain and in the Caribbean as well, and on the African continent. So the historiography worries me. I asked one of my students to do a quick search, just do reparations and see who came up. It was many of the heirs of slavery. I'm just saying as it is. I'm saying it's Dukuno. Now down well, but it will sustain you in the future. I was just intrigued. I said, just do a reference, just do cross-referencing. It's kind of intriguing though. We've got to be real about this. The people are being foregrounded in the historiography are the people who have just recently joined the movement. Thank you. I might get an amen. For my church, you see, I get a couple of amens. You need to go back to church and realise the call and response. Yeah, the call and response. You still work on that in the black church. Next up, I'm coming down. I think there's only one. Only a couple more. There was the historiography in terms of projecting back. And then there was the political campaign. Look, if critical race theory has taught us anything, it's that convergence, ideas convergence is necessary to put political pressure on people racialized as white to do anything. I just wonder if it's enough to have a 10-point plan. I'd like to see a political process and program that involves boycott. Why is it coming again? People have done all that wickedness to you. Why are you still taking the honours? OBE, CBE, Sir so-and-so, when these people have spent so much time doing you in. Where is the resistance? I'm just saying, the young black people I speak to, they're confused. I said, how come they're criticizing these folk and then being willing to take the honors that come out of that corrupt history? Where's the resistance? There needs to be some kind of consistency in this project in terms of the political campaigning. So I'd like to see a much more aggressive political stance. I know that you have to be diplomatic. Obviously, I failed that course at university, the diplomacy one. Whereas you have to be diplomatic. But surely, if our history of struggle teaches us anything, it's that we don't get anywhere without a fight.
Absolutely.
Foucault was correct. People don't give up power without a fight. And that struggle always has to come from the bottom up. 3 C's. I'm going to move quickly on the 4 C's now, if I've got through them all, because I was writing them down quickly as we go. So what are the solutions then? Some of the solutions, and look, what we'd like to see is greater collaboration. Why can't we have a reparations centre that does the work within the UK, West Africa and the Caribbean all joined up? The Trevelyan money, gone to the University of the West Indies. The money from Glasgow, gone to the University of the West Indies. I mean, and that's going to the petty bourgeois folk in the West Indies. Working poor proletariat communities. Grenada, sorry, great Grenada. But what I'm saying is, it's going to for further research. I'm just saying, I'd like to see it doesn't work in economics, but I'd like to try and see some trickle down. Politics at work here, because it isn't necessarily taken. How do you not take seriously Walter Rodney's ideas of grounding? You have to have a communal meeting at the start, at the middle, at the end to decide policy. When the rich and powerful, still Polk's taught us this, whether they're black or white and in positions of power, they can still be oppressors. We need greater collaboration. I'd like to see a centre here using some of the expertise that we have. The second C is, let me just see, please, can we have some calculus going on? We should not allow anybody to strike a deal without showing us how they've come up with the finances. We really shouldn't. The USPG money, the money from the Gladstone family, the money from the Trevelyans, the money from the University of Glasgow, the USPG, as I said, nobody knows how they've come to those figures, and the reality is they're shortchanging us. The next C then, alongside collaboration, the calculus is what I'm calling for, is just consistency. Consistency in terms of approach, consistency in terms of method, so we can get away from what is really a free-for-all. It's a free-for-all. And we're expected to be happy because there's a few crumbs coming off the table. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves to a degree for allowing it to get this far without challenging what our leaders are doing. It's deeply problematic. I told you it was Dukkanu. It might go down well, but in the long term, it might sustain you. So rhetorical device days, the black preaching tradition there. Sorry, too much hip hop. You also filter into hip hop culture. Final C then, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't make it a C. But a decolonial historiography. You need to ask critical questions about the way in which the historical work is being done. Because I can tell you, with the Anglican project, the historical methods were from the last century. You can't do a history project, and I'm not a historian, I'm a generalist. I work across disciplines, across texts, because I've always thought the problems that we face are so complex, one discipline can't address them. You cannot do a history, you can't be a serious PhD candidate and not talk about reflexivity. How are you going to manage your own biases as you approach the archives? You cannot do a PhD dissertation without dealing with the coloniality of the research methods. None of that is mentioned in the Anglican document. None of that is mentioned in the other documents that I've seen. So they're using archival research, which, as Bell Hooks taught us, means that what the master's tools will not.
Dismantle the master's house.
Thank you. It's about maintaining the status quo. So finally, I'm just saying, you'll need to catch up on your Bell Hooks. I'm just asking for a decolonial historiography. So just to summarize, then, I've just asked for 5 Ps. Pan-African dimension, that we deal properly with the payment, that we have a program of restitution, that we project Black effectively in terms of the historiography, and that also we have a political campaign involving boycott, involving some kind of purposeful, non-direct action to resist what is taking place. And then the C's, which I've suggested, are greater collaboration from the outset. How can we really talk about Glasgow with seeing what happened to Hakeem? How can we really talk about doing serious history when we're seeing one of our preeminent historians lose his job with no comeback, no resistance, when we're talking about the need to do more history? There's something quite corrupt happening there and problematic. We need also then to do the calculus. Nobody should stand up in these spaces without explaining how they calculated unjust enrichment, how they calculated loss of earnings, how they there's 5 of them in the American system, but the British system we have 3, going all the way through and telling us how they did it, because then that will come up to what, 400 million, 500 million, 1 billion, 2 billion. And if they then say, we're going to offer you 18 million, I say, well, hold on a minute. There's something, so that's why they don't want to do the calculus. Want to pull the wool over our eyes. So just to end, we are in danger of participating, sleepwalking into the great reparations rip-off, where other people control the narrative, they control the money, and if you're stupid, they control you, the people. Like I said, it's dukono. You might not like it when it's going down, but in the long run, it's going to be good for you.